This is John Fleischman with So Does It Matter.com. For those of you who haven't heard the story recently, there's two reasons why the website is called that. The first of which is that every time I'm thinking about writing about something, I always ask the same question before I write. So, does it matter? Because I don't want to waste your time and I don't want to waste my time. And the second reason why I use that address is because when I went into register.com, I was able to type in so does it matter.com and nobody had taken it, these days. And the old endeavor, the Flash Report, it continued over for several months. And now if you go to flashreport.org, it will take you here. But anyway, so I'm very happy at this Substack Live of the week to have a guest. I got a lot of positive feedback last week when I had Katie Grimes on
Oh,
as my
man.
guest. And I thought, how could I possibly trade up to somebody more amazing than Katie? And then after realizing that wasn't possible, I then thought to myself, well, how far low can I go? How can I actually make myself look better by finding a guest who is so terrible that I would just shine in the show? And then I immediately thought of you, Will. So I'm going to quickly introduce Will, and then we're going to hop right into what we're talking about today. So, how do I even introduce Will Swaim? So, in a minute, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about yourself. So, Will, first and foremost, is here with us today as the Chief Executive Officer of the California Policy Center. Will has forgotten more about the California Policy Center than I'll ever know. So, I'm going to let him when I turn the mic over to him, even though he's got his own mic, I'm going to let him tell you all for a moment about the California Policy Center. But Will and I go way back in Orange County politics. I don't mind divulging Will's deepest, darkest regret in life, which is that Will spent a period of time in his life as a leftist. I guess that would be the accurate way to
That's a
say it.
gentle. That's very gentle. Thank you.
Will was
I be
one liberal
specific.
son of a bitch. So I was an activist with Young Americans for Freedom and had gone on to start doing stuff around Orange County. And there was this wackadoodle guy who was the editor in chief, I guess the founding editor of the Orange County Weekly magazine. This is one of those magazines that on the left page, they attack any conservative for being conservative. And then on the right page, they have advertisements for ladies of the night and other great things.
They're
Um,
just escorts, John. Just escorts.
actually. But even back then, I knew something was going on because at the very same time that Will, with his pen and his prose, was out attacking conservatives, even then he had a cynicism towards government and he had an investigative reporter, Scott, who just would dig in on waste, fraud, and abuse wherever he found it. And of course, Will, being in Orange County, was mainly leading waste, fraud, and abuse against these crazy right wing people who ran everything in Orange County. But eventually, he and I both found each other a mutual love for his former mentor, Larry Agron, who was then and is now, with a break in between, the mayor of the People's Republic of Irvine. So, anyways, Will, hello.
Hi. Good to be here, John.
Yeah. So, Will, why don't you take a moment and just share with people a little bit about the California policies, and then we're going to jump right into talking about the governor's race.
Sure. California Policy Center was established a little over a decade ago, John, and established by a lot of friends of yours and mine, Mark Bucher, Bob Lowen, Mike Capaldi, Ed Ring. And the goal was to to solve for a problem that they had discovered over the course of several years in Republican politics. And that was, why is it that all of the reform initiatives, the candidates who are urging reform of California's, even then in the 90s, dysfunctional government, and then in the 2000s, just very dysfunctional government. Why is it we can't have schools that work? Our tax burden is among the highest in the nation. Our fuel prices, highest in the nation. Our homeless problems, highest in the nation. I could go on. You get the picture. What is it? What's the obstacle here? And they discovered, oh my gosh, it's these government unions, about 2 million people who are the employees. They're supposed to be our public servants. They're supposedly working for us, but they all belong to these unions into which they pay annual dues. And those dues are used to fund the campaigns of candidates who, once elected into office, return the favor in the form of higher pay and benefits and and perhaps most importantly, total control over the workplace. So my friends on the left who are really anxious about, reforming police and they believe in the problem of excessive police force, they wonder why can't anything get done? The real answer is the police union. Why are our firefighters retiring at age 50 with $300,000 per year in income in retirement and breaking the bank with post employment retirement benefits like total health care for themselves and their families until the last one drops dead? Because of their union. Why is education so screwed up in California? It's largely because of the teachers' union. So I could go on, you get the picture. We're here to fight that problem every single day. And there's no other group in California that really just laser focuses in on the problem of government unions.
And so if somebody was watching this and said, I am intrigued by something that Will Swaim said, how do I find the California Policy Center online? Where might we tell them to go, Will?
It's very difficult. Think this one through. California Policy Center. You
Okay,
go.
so you go to
So,
Coliseum,
yeah,
or if you're, by the way, if you're watching this, you could also just scroll down about 2 inches and click the button that says California Policy Center. It will also take you there. So I would encourage you to go check that out. And then Will and I are going to spend some time talking about a few great items today. Will is an expert, by the way. I think we also need to promote your weekly podcast. So, Will, I'm going to start here. So, many, many moons ago, many, many years ago, some 500 or 600 episodes ago, my friend Will Swaim and my friend and financial counselor, David Bonson, got together. What's those old commercials? The chocolate met the peanut butter, and together they created something better than they were individually. And so once a week, they have a podcast that is under the auspices, under the umbrella of National Review Magazine called Radio Free California. And I think I'm not sure what day of the week they tape it, but it tends to come out on Wednesdays, if I have that right. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's
roughly. It's
awesome.
whatever David's schedule allows. Right.
Right. So David is a sharp economist who knows, I would say this happily with the hopes that he's watching this, knows a little bit about a lot of things, as opposed to some of us are specialists and know a lot about a few things. David would tell you he knows a lot about a lot of things, which actually he kind of embarrassingly does. Unless you get into pop culture, then you might catch him, right? So he's got
He's really good on rap music and sports.
So this podcast is available on any of your favorite podcasting apps. I'll put the link to the National Review page that features the podcast, and I think it has links on there. You should check it out. I listen to it every week. There's interesting people on it, and every once in a while, if you listen carefully, you might find me. But it's very
That's right.
rare. I'm not really on Will's favorite list as much as some other people.
That's not true. That
That's
is not
not
true.
true.
I
All
think
right.
you are the most frequent guest. There you go.
There you go. So let's talk about the California governor's race. Will, what do you think? Here we are with the ballots are in the mail. Ballots are no longer in the mail. Ballots are in people's homes. People are ready to vote. The race has come down to 7 people, 7 human beings, very human beings. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I would say that if you really want to listen to, I think, the most honest appraisal of what's going on in the governor's race, you have to listen to what John recorded. What was it last night you recorded this?
Oh, come on. I went on my rant this morning. So
It was the best, John. That was among the most bracing analyses of the gubernatorial contest I've heard, seen, read anywhere. It was fantastic.
if you
Was
haven't seen it, that'll
under
be linked below. Although, if you're watching this, there's an overwhelming likelihood you got it in your inbox. But I was having
yeah.
some problems with my email this morning, so a lot of people got it late. But basically, this is what happens when, and maybe I need to do this more often. Instead of something happening, and then when I get around to it, I record something where I've calmed down. In this case, I decided to record a video right after watching the debate, which I'm now calling the Clusterfuckistan debate because it was just ludicrous.
Well, your analysis was spot on, John. I just so here's the broad philosophical problem I have. You have a bunch of candidates who are backed by environmentalists and government unions. That's their most important endorsement. If you're going to run for governor on the Democrat side, you got to line up those endorsements. And I think what's most astonishing is that they continue to call for fairness in taxation, by which they mean grabbing more money from more people. We of course know that SEIU has a billionaire tax. California Teachers Association is pushing for extension again of the
Uh, to
13.3%
be clear, they're
in
just they're done with extensions. This is just making it permanent.
permanent. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
And this was supposed to be a one-time tax increase. It was an emergency tax increase. And like, what was that, 2012, 2013, when they first passed this thing? It was supposed to be temporary. Now they're just going to make it permanent after more than a decade. The problem here is not revenue. The state budget has almost doubled since Gavin Newsom took over. And yet now we have a problem of structural deficits. I just wanted to read, I'm pretty sure you've seen this already. The Legislative Analyst's Office just came out with a gigantic report. It's phenomenal. But here's the literal money shot. They wrote, in retrospect, the state could not afford to sustain its existing services while funding expansions and new programs under the same tax revenue structure. Further, as we describe in this report, due to the state's constitutional limitations on how it can spend tax revenue, addressing these deficits will likely require at least some, if not significant, spending reductions in future. In short, in the years ahead, policymakers will have difficult decisions to make. If you listened to that debate last night, John, the gubernatorial debate, I know you did. I'm speaking rhetorically here. What's really fascinating about this is the decision is already here. We are underwater in the state budget. Though we have increased revenue to over $300 billion and started just a little bit ago with $140 billion in revenue per year, we roughly doubled it. We are outspending that increase and outspending it so significantly, John, that you know what's next. There's going to be budget battles and fights and calls for tax hikes like nothing I've seen in my lifetime, I think. I think that where we're really headed is a complete, you called it a cluster. So
Yeah, and
you
you know
have,
what? One thing that's amazing, Will, having now watched, I think it may be five, at least four of these debates, not a single person asking a question in one of these debates has framed a question as, "This is how broke the state is. This is how we have no money. What are you going to cut? What are you going to do about it?" It's like they ask, like, "What are you going to do about homeless? What are you going to do about housing? What
right.
are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about that?" But it's like asking, "What direction are you going to take the car?" as a question when the car's on fire.
Yeah.
And the real question needs to be, how are you gonna put out the fire, or else how are you gonna drive the car anywhere?
Yeah.
And so
Uh,
it
uh,
it really makes you wonder.
It just, the answer to that question, honestly, is that you have to cut the size of government dramatically. And simultaneously, as ironic as it may seem, you have to begin to cut taxes and regulation. You've got to do that. There's almost no problem in California that cannot be solved with less government. That is a thing that would have never come out of my mouth 20 years ago. It would have simply been back then class warfare language. I mean, like I speak leftist, and I think you do, John, after having engaged with the left for so many decades. But the fact is that they can't answer these questions honestly, because the honest answers mean that the people endorsing them, backing them, the government unions primarily, are going to be out of work. And they can't talk that way. They just cannot talk that way. So they have to invoke Trump's name almost universally. I mean, it is their get out of jail free card on the left. If you ask them a pointed question about policy, they will slip your grip and answer, well, the real problem is Donald Trump. And I'm afraid that most of our friends and neighbors are so deranged on the issue of Trump that they accept that as a final answer. I would challenge any of those people. I'm not a professional. I've not been inside government except at the city level in decades. And then I was a lefty. But I would challenge any of these people to a debate. I wouldn't trust the Democratic candidates with a toaster near an open electric outlet. These are the kinds of people who will kill themselves. They are really problematic. I have been really fascinated, therefore, by the sudden rise of Javier Becerra, who may be among the emptiest of suits. I really cannot find a job in which he has distinguished himself.
I
And
I
please,
I actually have one of my concerns about him is that, he is, especially when you put him next to Katie Porter and Tom Steyer, he appears very moderate in his temperament. And I'm afraid that what's happening is that you get the voters who are just tired of the extremism coming out of Sacramento, but they're substituting a candidate who they think is mild mannered for a candidate who is mild in their ideology or who is mild in their public policy prescriptions. And I don't think they understand how committed Becerra is to, I call it the cycle, right? So at a very basic level, and Will, you've been out and around. I have this in a column that I put out this afternoon because I was talking about homelessness. Because from the debate last night, they're talking about homelessness, and so my whole thing here is that all of them want to talk about what they're going to do about homelessness. And of course, it's hard to want to believe what someone will do about homelessness if we can't come to an agreement about what is causing homelessness. And when you start to talk about what's causing homelessness, then you get back to the fact that, as de Tocqueville said, as Alexis de Tocqueville said all those years ago when he surveyed the American people, that what made America great was that our people were good and that they were organized into social structures and there were communities and churches and synagogues. I'm not sure he talked much about synagogues, but I do because I'm Jewish. You know, and so what ends up happening is that the collectivist leftists, they start growing the government. And so you end up with a situation where somebody, you back in the day, right? If someone's having some challenges, right? They can go to their family members and say, I'm having a tough go, but we'll help you. And if they can't help you, you know what? You're going to go to the other people at your church or your synagogue or your mosque, where your local religious community, and get some help. And if that doesn't work, you're going to go to the YMCA, the community centers, the areas around you. And then from there, you're going to be going to people who maybe have doing more charitable giving. You'd have all of this social stability that comes not from government, but from a robust society that is operating free of government interference. And so
That's right.
suddenly you get a group of people that come along that actually, we don't want government. Government shouldn't be the last resort. Government should be the first resort.
First.
And then what they say is, but in order to be the first resort, we need more money. Let's raise taxes, let's raise fees, let's create regulations. And then it happens. It happens just like this. You're sitting over the dining room table, honey. We can't make ends meet because with my salary and these taxes, we can barely pay our rent. And suddenly, the spouse, the other spouse has to go, well, I know it's better if I'm home with the kids, but I better go get a job. And now all of a sudden, two people are working hard so that the government can fulfill its role of being the first line of defense, the first. And then you get a spinning cycle because with all of these candidates running for governor, right, they all see the only solutions to homelessness as doubling down on government, which makes, and I shouldn't say they all the Democrats, and it makes complete sense because they're unable to understand, maybe the same way that an alcoholic isn't able to understand they have a drinking problem, right? They don't understand that the very philosophy, the very ideology that they espouse, and the policies that are coming from it are the creation of the homelessness problem because they don't understand that if tomorrow they reduce the taxes, reduce the fees, reduce the regulations, people would be free to once again, kind of like the house falling on the wicked witch, freeing the munchkins, right? All of a sudden, people would be free to go, you know what? That's Uncle Ed on the street. I couldn't do anything about it before, but now I can. Ed, come on and stay with us, and you could stay with us for 5 days. And then over the weekend, it's a little busy, but Nancy from the Y says she can take you over the weekend, and so on and so forth. And suddenly the homelessness problem starts to get dealt with not by the cold, hard facing government, but by warm, loving people that have a nexus to this person. And then, of course, the last part, which goes right to the California Policy Center jugular, is that what really ends up happening overall is that these unions get involved. And so, what is a righteous cause by the ideological left, they're true believers. All the unions know is if these people are willing to soak up a bunch of money to solve homelessness, have we got a union for you? And then the money
That's
goes
right.
into the unions and it doesn't help anybody because this is
That's right.
what we call the homeless industrial complex. And, this is what I say, and I'm going to get back to you because you're the special guest, is that this is the Faustian deal that takes place between the unions and the ideologues. But the ideologues are really having one put over to them. I wrote about BART a few weeks ago, the Bay Area Rapid Transit District, and I think all of these green people are trying to figure out why are we having trouble with our BART system, not realizing that they got in bed with all of the unions that operate BART, who are all making lots of money, and it's like they're taking everything but the brass fittings off of every BART train, and the people are like, well, what's going on? Well,
Yeah, there's a public policy expression for this, John, that you know. It's called service level insolvency. It means that at some point, the amount of cash coming into a government agency is only enough to pay the employees, but not enough to actually reinvest and build schools, maintain those transit systems, maintain the roads. We haven't got the money to support, to sustain our capital infrastructure. And that's when you get this massive push from the unions to say, hey, it's about time. I'm looking at my watch here. It's time for us to get a pay increase. And the city manager says, we haven't got any cash to pay you. Don't worry. We'll run the entire campaign for a new sales tax hike, a new bond initiative. And then what comes out, what the public sees is, oh my gosh, the government doesn't have enough money to spend on this whatever the program is. Our schools are falling apart and the rich aren't paying their fair share. So we need to build our school. Where are the millions of dollars you brought in to maintain your schools or your roads?
right? And so
Um, can I just say I'm sorry, go ahead,
you could
please.
say a lot of things because you're supposed to be the guest. As a matter of fact, one of the critiques I get, I'll get 30 or 40 notes after one of these, and one of the most frequent ones is you should let the guest talk more.
I don't know, John. I enjoy hearing you talk. I know what I think, but I love Alexis de Tocqueville. And if some of you out there haven't had a chance to read Democracy in America, it's like it's a doorstop of a book. It's got to be 1,200 pages, I think, the copy I've got. But there are moments in that. This is a Frenchman. He was an aristocrat who comes to America in the 1830s, and he's traveling around the country and he's trying to understand. He knows this is where France is headed. France is going to end up eliminating its aristocracy. They hope not by force, but they're going to have a democracy. What's it going to look like? What are the advantages? What are the perils? He's taking a tour, if you will, of the United States, trying to figure out how does this thing really work? And one of the images that stands out for me in reference to your idea that government isn't supposed to be the first resort, it's supposed to be the last, is he comes to a town where he says it was as common as everything he saw across the country, where people needed to build a school. They didn't have a government to build a school. They didn't ask the Congress to send them $100,000 in 19th century money. They built it themselves. And he says Americans get together to solve a public problem. And then when the problem is solved, they return to their lives. They go back to being workers on the railroad or school teachers or farmers mostly. And he
Right?
said they don't build this permanent institution with which we're familiar in France, he says, and with which we Americans are painfully familiar. So I agree with you completely. I will say that, this is one of the challenges I have that I think, we used to until the late 1960s. We had a mental health system that tried to step in. All the family dynamics you've described and the community dynamics are already falling apart in America and certainly in California in the 1960s. And the result was you had some people who were just, and let's face it, there are some people who are just too violent to live. When Uncle Jim starts not just drinking, but hallucinating and seeing the devil in your house, you got a bigger problem than you might be able to handle. So where does Uncle Jim go? In the 1960s, he might have gone to a state mental health hospital. And I want to say something that's sort of controversial about one of my heroes, but that's Ronald Reagan. In 1968 or 1970, he signs off on a bill that will eliminate the state mental health system. Why does he do that? Because the left is banging on him and saying, we don't need this thing. All these people who you call mentally ill, they're just revolutionary. They're just eccentrics. They're just people who live differently than we do. I call this the Ken Kesey problem. For those of you old enough to remember the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, it depicts mental health hospitals as Dickensian hellholes. And many of them were, let's be clear, but not most of them. And they were essential to helping us get people off the streets into a place where they could be taken care of. But Reagan decided this is a great way to accomplish two things: appease the left and cut the budget. And so we did. And within 18 months, there are stories in the LA Times, San Francisco Chronicle, the Sac B, documenting that people are ending up on the streets. They've been released. They go out on the streets. What do they do? Because they're crazy. They end up back in jail in 3 days. And then the cycle begins. And we have never stepped back in to correct that problem. And one of the reasons we can't, John, is because who would run a state mental health hospital today? It would be the Service Employees International Union, the Nurses Union, etc. And they would turn these things into a feeding trough for themselves,
Right?
not for their patients. As you pointed out, the merciless, cold, icy hand of government is not our friend. If you doubt that, go to any inner city school and watch how the kids are being educated, or rather not. So I could go on with this, obviously, but I think my
I'm kind of
point is,
I'm just kind of
please.
laughing because this is the way you and I talk about a governor's race in the
Gosh, yeah, we're
policy.
back with Alexander de Tocqueville and Ronald Reagan.
Oh, that's all right. So I'm going
So
to actually make
can
a
we?
final. I'm going to make a final point relative to the governor's race because I want to move on. We're going to talk about immigration here in a minute and oil and energy efficiency, energy independence. But I think as we come along here, people have their ballots. You got 5 Democrats and 2 Republicans. I've made it pretty clear. My biggest fear is that we're only going to have 2 Democrats on the general election ballot. I think there's a lot of people that are, they believed the malarkey that somehow 2 Republicans could end up in the top two. As soon as Swalwell blew up, the numbers don't work anymore, and now
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, you've got Hilton and Becerra that are in the pole positions, And it was just announced today, which should surprise absolutely nobody who's a regular subscriber to my site. But what do you know? Now there's a multi-million-dollar special interest efforts to do what? Attack Steve Hilton, because the unions already know that if the choice is between Steyer and Becerra, they've already won. They
Yes.
don't even have to go through the the
Should What should conservatives do? I work for a 501(c)(3). I speak not as a a C3.
I I have not endorsed, Bianco. I have not endorsed Hilton. I think either of them would be a superior governor to California, especially when compared to any of the five bozos on the left, who all of whom agree that government should be big, robust, and a first line of defense against all ills in our society, right? Even if they have some differences about how to get about doing that. That's why I laugh about Matt Mahan. He's supposedly the guy that will make government work, but he still believes in making a big, fat, huge government work that should be providing health care to illegal aliens and should be building a high speed rail and all these other things. But, anyways, here's what I would tell people to do artfully is you got to go online and look up, just go to your chat bot or go to Google and say, what are the latest polls in the California governor's race and figure out which Republican's on top and you got to add your vote. Now, as a practical matter, like if I was voting today, I'd be casting a ballot for Steve Hilton, not because I don't like Chad Bianco, not because I don't even think he might even make a better governor than Steve Hilton, but because right now, if something doesn't change, if Hilton drops, he and Chad Bianco can go on a very long cruise around the world for a year because neither of them will be on the ballot. As far as I'm concerned, the two of them were in a primary that ended last week because now it's real time and we stand and here's the real challenge, right? Because I am not pie in the sky wishful thinking that somehow a Republican is going to get elected to be the governor of California if he's running against a Democrat. This is a solid blue state. Go look at the results of the Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump race in California, where roughly 60% of the vote was with Harris. Go look at the Prop 50 special election last November, where roughly 60% of the vote was yes on Prop 50 and what was a Trump referendum. As a matter of fact, we just seen the level of implosion that would be necessary. Like if Steve Hilton were on the ballot against Becerra and something like what just happened to Swalwell happened, okay, that would be the scenario where something could
But
possibly come
there's
together.
but there's another reason to take your recommendation that you look at who's on top and you add your vote to that Republican. And I think that's because if the race is not competitive, if it's, let's say, Steyer versus Becerra,
Yeah, our
I
turnout.
think conservative turnout is lower. And that is a bad thing for our side because there will be statewide ballot initiatives, including the Service Employee International Union's billionaire tax, an attempt to take down the Prop 13, and we could go on.
And
But if
this
we
is the irony that I've been telling people. I've had people tell me, "I'm glad that the voter ID initiative is on the ballot because it will help in the governor's race." And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. You need the governor's race to help pass the voter ID initiative. It's the other way around. There is no
right.
voter ID initiative that is going to take a state that has 2.5 million more Democrats than Republicans and magically, I mean, the voter ID wouldn't even be implemented. It's just on the ballot. If you believe that there's massive fraud, it will be in place on the election ballot this November, right? If
I need to ask you one technical question before you move on. I know you're in a hurry.
I'm not in
S
a
Swalwell's name is still on the ballot.
Yeah, it's on the ballot, and there's been at least one survey that tested the ballot with his name on it. He just no longer registers. I mean,
Oh, is that right?
there's been
So
that
that is
he
filtered through.
Yeah, he blew up in such a spectacular name that he is the most well-known Democrat in the state right now, I would imagine. And so, maybe he ends up with 1 or 2% of the vote. But, I actually was kind of hoping that Katie Porter would have a bit of a surge, which is counterintuitive. I wrote a column about this for the California Post because really the only way that we can be sure that a Republican makes the ballot is if the Democrats have split up their vote in enough ways. If everything keeps consolidating behind the hyperbolic, cherub cheeked, crazy, anticked billionaire who made his money from oil, right? Or Becerra, the mild mannered left wing crazy guy who thinks that, everyone's healthcare is not a consumer product, but in fact, some sort of natural law, right? Really. Like,
That's
you
right.
know, right? This is where I stop and I say, Will, I really like you, and I'm very, very comfortable if you make unhealthy decisions. But if I've got to cover your healthcare insurance, I want you in bubble wrap and I want you in bed by 8 p.m., right? And you better
I
brush your
have the
teeth because
second
I
one
don't want
done,
to
yeah.
pay for your cavities.
That is really something, John, that you and I have talked about over the years. We should probably let people know that you and I used to be on public television together here locally in Southern California. And, it wasn't just the on camera stuff, it was the conversations that we had to the side that helped reshape my political philosophy. But one of the problems is that when you make government so big that its responsibilities encompass so many spaces in our lives, our private lives, everybody has an incentive to monitor everybody else's behavior. I mean, imagine the COVID experiment run now through every other additional area of our lives. During COVID, if you walk down the street, an empty street, as I did in Irvine one day, I was running and a woman pulled over and she just berated me because I was running without a mask on a suburban street where there was
So,
nobody.
do you have any doubt whatsoever if they could constitute if they hold on a minute, I just my screen went dark because I wasn't touching the screens. Do you have any doubt whatsoever that if it could be done constitutionally, that all of these cigarette bans that have been made in public places, if they could, would they tell you you can't smoke? Not even in your own apartment. You can't smoke. It's bad for everyone. They would do that.
They
And they
might,
would
but they would be
argue,
pushed back against by all the people who back the tobacco tax as a huge revenue stream for themselves. What would they do then? If we all stop
yeah,
smoking and
well,
do what
that's
the
but
progressives want, the
yeah,
progressives get
you're getting
money.
into details. You're getting into details.
All right.
My broader point being that these are nanny state people who are very, very comfortable saying, "Here are the guidelines about how you should live your life." And you know what? And eventually, you could imagine we're in Russia. You know what? We're in Russia. It's Red Meat Friday, right? This is the one day of the week that you can have red meat because if you eat more of it, you could have heart attack and heart conditions, and well, we'd be responsible for your heart surgery. So, and oh,
Mhm.
by the way, we're closing the hang gliding school. That's closed. No more hang
Yeah.
gliding because you're not allowed to make dangerous choices. By the way, no more motorcycles, right? We're just, going to go through. Anyways, you and I go on and on. When I was talking with you about what we might talk about on this program, one of the things that you brought up was talking about California's unique position as a border state and all of the free flow of people coming over it and what that really meant for national security. And then I'm just going to attempt to push this all together. And then that kind of led to a discussion about national security on the energy front. And it led to a conclusion that California public policy is very adverse to American national security. And since that's the thesis, Professor, would you please speak to it?
Sure. So, yeah, I think that when it comes to immigration, you've got a really classic example of a state that for about 40 years at least, and arguably longer, has sort of turned a blind eye to illegal immigration for a whole host of reasons. And the result is that we have hundreds of thousands of millions of people now in California. The estimates range from 4 to 6 million. Maybe you've heard different numbers, but those people are actually brought. That was a great moment. Let me see if I can find this comment. Where is my Katie Porter story from last night? I was reading some of Katie's comments, and here we
You're going
go.
to have to
She said,
paraphrase. Oh, you found it? You
well, here we
found it.
go. She writes, it's the job of the California governor. This is during last night's debate. It's the job of the California governor to protect every single Californian. The sanctuary state policy is designed to make sure that our state resources, the taxpayer dollars, the public servants that we have are focusing on doing their jobs, which is not cooperating with the federal immigration authorities. These are Californians. She means of the illegal immigrants. They contribute to our economy. They pay taxes, and they're one of the only ways our state has been growing in recent years. That's an amazing revelation by Ms. Porter that our population has been shrinking so remarkably because of bad policies, hurting especially the middle class, that our population would be deep in the red. We would have lost many, many more people than we have at present. Why are we able to sustain our population? Because of illegal immigration. So who benefits from illegal immigration? Well, I've written about this before, but when the ICE raids started in June, we had the deployment of ICE agents in LA. One of the first guys to get arrested in a very prominent role was David Huerta. Who is Huerta? He's head of the Service Employees International Union. And he just happened to be at a remote warehouse in South LA. How did he know that ICE was going to show up there? He got there as the ICE agents were showing up. Well, SEIU is one of the funders of a local program that is supposed to surveil ICE agents and other federal officials. So SEIU sets up a surveillance unit to monitor federal agents who are simply enforcing the law so that Huerta and other activists can show up and block the ICE agents in the performance of their duty.
Which
And
is
if you dig
exposure, by the way,
deeper,
that's exactly what he did. There was a big garage to go into this facility, and he stood in front of it so that their cars couldn't drive through, giving the people inside sure the opportunity to flee, or if they want to fight, to let them fight. Surprise is one of the most significant benefits and assets to a law enforcement agency for their safety.
yes, and for the safety of the people inside, right?
Right.
Like even the
Everybody,
the
everybody's
perps, the
safety.
suspects. Yes. So he gets arrested, and people, the left is just erupting, like, "Oh my God, you've elected the head of, you've arrested the head of one of the largest unions in our state. This is outrageous. How could you do this?" And I pointed out in the Wall Street Journal, well, you could arrest this guy because he's illegally impeding officers in the enforcement of federal law. But more importantly, his union is built upon illegal immigration. Their union acknowledges that a lot of its members paying dues to that union are people who are here illegally. And is a kind of a trafficking organization. The people who come here illegally get jobs in, bus drivers, kitchens in schools. Lunch Lady Doris is a member of SEIU or at the airport. And those people pay dues in exchange for the expectation that SEIU will continue to push for higher rates of illegal immigration and sanctuary state laws. They have been the architects of the sanctuary state model. I know in part because I was present for a lot of those conversations back in the 80s and 90s. They were upfront about it. We're going to bring these people in. They're going to make them part of the permanent underclass. They're going to join our union. We're going to complain that they're not paid enough, and we're going to protect them from the police. So why is that bad for America? Because a lot of these people end up, contrary to Katie Porter, they end up not merely paying taxes, but relying in a disproportionate way on all public services. And so you have people who are here taking advantage of public services, which drives up the cost of those programs and makes them inaccessible to people who are here legally. In many cases, people who look very much like the illegal immigrants, but are here legally. This hurts
Right.
working people. It hurts the poor. And what it really does is create an open, unlocked back door for the entire nation. You probably aren't going to get through Texas very easily. Arizona is pretty tough, but California welcomes you in. Gosh, there was a wonderful story
Yeah.
here, John. Pardon me for being too pumped up on caffeine.
No, that's all right.
But you saw
If
this.
I'm gonna let you look up the story, but while you're looking up the story, it's just like if I always think in the context of political cartoons because I write hundreds of them, right? And I'm just imagining that, you're going along the Texas border and the houses on the other side have fences and they're closed that says not available for illegal aliens. And you get to California and the porch is open and the warm chocolate chip cookies are on the porch.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
everyone's like, well, you can't blame an illegal alien for crossing the border because, the Cinnabon smell is coming across the border, inviting them to come in. If you go to the airport, Cinnabon was always
Yes.
famous. No matter where you were, you're like, "Oh, I need a
What
cinnamon roll,"
is that?
right?
Yeah.
And then I've actually had people say to me, "Well, it's unfair. They came here because we basically invited them, and how can we now kick them out?"
Yes, yes. Yeah, I gotta say, quick footnote, I am sensitive to the fact that I have grown up around people who I know or suspect are here illegally. I've grown up around them. My children went to school with their kids. I go to a Catholic church where some of the members I suspect are not quite here illegally, and I guess that because during the ICE deployment, many of them stop showing up at church. Sometimes you talk to them, their only language really is Spanish. That doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I have tremendous sympathy for those people, some of whom have been here for 10 or 20 years. I get it.
They
Integrated.
were basically welcomed here and then told by
Yes.
not by their friends, they were told by city council members,
And
mayors,
the governor.
supervisors, state legislators, governors, all of these people. It's okay. It's all right. And then since we've already gone back and tarnished Ronald Reagan once before as governor, now I can go back and tarnish him as president because, back in 1986, he signed a deal to provide amnesty for the people that were in the country illegally in return for no more illegal immigration. And boy, shame on him, right? But all
Right.
that did was create a new permission structure. Everybody come here because at some point there'll be another amnesty and you guys
That's
will
right.
all get excused. And then I get these wild eyes people that kind of look at me when they they literally equate coming across the border illegally to like jaywalking.
Yes,
And
they
so
do.
how often have we heard it? Like last night in the gubernatorial debate, you hear it. This is about, by the way, criminal aliens that have violated federal immigration law. They basically say these people, if they commit a criminal act, of course they should go to jail. Of course they should be deported, but they don't consider the breaking of the immigration law the
That's
criminal
right.
act. They
Yeah.
literally think that that is absolved in it. And somebody brought it up. I don't remember if it was Hilton or Bianco. It wouldn't have been one of the others who literally said that, isn't it convenient that you're gonna pick, I think it was Bianco, you're gonna pick which laws you wanna enforce and which ones you don't, when our job is actually to enforce all of the
The
laws, and if you
law.
don't
Yeah,
like a law, your job is to change the law. But
that's
instead, so
That's why I
anyways.
was really, like I have been banging on this drum now for about 15 years, but there is a federal law, which the federal government has, in fairness, frequently refused to enforce. But it is illegal to harbor, traffic, assist in any way somebody who is in this country illegally. And our sanctuary state law, I think it's Senate Bill 54, just flouts that, just says, we don't care. This is how California acts, as if it is like an island in the land. It is a separate nation, a city state, we're only all of the federal laws to us are really just a suggestion. But here's a story this week. This is I'm sorry, it was a couple of weeks ago, actually, but I just keep reading about it now. The city of El Cajon down in San Diego County is suing the state of California because of sanctuary laws. They say you are requiring us as a city to violate federal law. And we won't do it anymore. So they're suing. And I want to just shout out to Mayor Bill Wells. If anybody on this call knows the mayor, tell him, awesome job, you're a hero. He's doing this the right way. He's not just saying we refuse, j'accuse. He's saying we're going to undo this thing. We're going to court. So kudos to El Cajon Mayor Bill Wells. But he's identified properly that there is a federal supremacy law, or federal supremacy is in the Constitution, and federal immigration law is a federal, not a local, not a state law.
Right.
We don't get to play in that space.
And that and there's an ultimate irony, and then we're gonna talk about the energy independence issue. But the irony here is that for all of these people that are complaining about ICE coming into neighborhood communities and being objectionable about it, there's another way, right? Which is that if local law enforcement who knows the community, who knows the area, would take care of immigration enforcement, then you would not need federal officers doing interior enforcement in the United States. Will and I will tell all of you watching, that's not our preference. We're civil libertarians. We don't want a big presence for the federal government locally. But guess what happens when the local police don't enforce the law, and then the county law enforcement doesn't enforce the law, and the state law enforcement doesn't enforce the law? Don't be surprised when the feds have to come in and do it. You've literally chosen that outcome because you've done all anyways. Let's
Yeah,
talk
no,
let's talk about the issue you're about to bring up. I first heard raised by Congressman Vince Fong. I read it in an editorial at one point, which is that energy policy in California is directly tied to national defense issues. So talk about that, Will.
well, I want to hear what Vince said first. What did the
Well,
congressman have to say?
well, the congressman, as I recall from reading his article, was talking about the fact that California produces jet fuel. California produces all kinds of fuel that is used in the military, in our military bases, whether it's our Air Force bases, our Marine bases, our Army bases, and that also, I seem to recall he might have even been talking about the ability of California to be, again, part of an energy independent America so that we as a country are not reliant on foreign oil in order to take care of ourselves, which
Right.
fundamentally matters in a situation like, I don't know, let's just say that you wanted to get into a non-war war with Iran, right? Well, I mean, with all due respect, we aren't producing enough oil in California to take care of California. By the way, again, back to my favorite word here in Clusterfuckistan, because we've managed to come up with the fact that unlike the other 49 states, or maybe 47, because I have a couple adjacent to California, we have to have our own special blend of gas because we
That's
can't
right.
be like other people. And so, the whole thing's jacked up. So that was Vince's
Yeah.
perspective. And I don't know if it
Yeah,
shares yours or if you have a more.
mine is a little broader. I love his specificity. Mine is that simply we sit atop some of the world's greatest energy reserves. We're third in the nation in terms of energy reserves, behind Texas and Alaska. That's saying an awful lot. Yet we have gas prices that are equivalent to the state of Hawaii. They are the highest in the nation. And Hawaii, you can understand why its fuel prices are so high. It's an island. Well, California is a kind of an island by design. We have decided, as you say, to have boutique gasoline. And there are arguably some reasons for that. You and I grew up during the smog alerts of the 1970s. I shouldn't say that. You're so much younger than I
Yeah,
am.
but to be clear, there have been so many advances now in gasoline that the
Yes.
gas used in any state in America would absolve that problem.
Yeah, that was my next point. There was a reason that we had this. We've just never abandoned it, even, despite the fact of innovation. So that's where it started, but we never changed. We never caught up to the technology. So we insist on this very boutique blend of energy, of oil, a gasoline rather, that nobody else can really use. It's just for us. So we have winter and summer blends. But the most important thing is that Gavin Newsom has been on a campaign, started first under Jerry Brown and arguably even before them, but it was really Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom to simply shut down oil. And when I was on the left in the 90s participating in these conversations and participating on strategy, it was well understood that it was a feature, not a bug. It was an advantage to us that oil prices, gasoline prices in California would skyrocket. We wanted the pain to be so awful that people would drive less, or if they were forced to drive at all, they would buy cars that were more fuel efficient and burn less oil. And ultimately, they would buy electric cars. That was our goal. We did not see the price of gasoline as a problem. It was a benefit. And also
But
because
it
we
was
had patents
not a
on it.
fault, it was a feature.
That's
And
exactly right.
by the way, I guarantee you there are very extreme activists on the progressive left who are overjoyed at the $6 gas price. I mean, they
Oh,
just have to think
100%.
maybe today one more person will get on a bus, one more person will get on their bike, one more person will abandon that horrible gas-powered vehicle that is destroying the world.
That's right, John. So this week, it was all over the press. There was a, this is, I don't know if I can show you this picture, but it's a beautiful and poetic and very bittersweet sort of photo. Let me see if I can show this to our listeners here. That
Oh,
is
look at that.
the last
And
foreign tanker coming into the port of Long Beach with oil, foreign oil. We are now 86% of our oil in California now comes from foreign sources and our gasoline. The point of
we
me telling you that is that those cargo ships, like the one I just showed you, they burn something called bunker fuel. It is the most polluting fuel. It is worse than coal. But we think in California that if
right.
we shut down refineries and make it impossible to actually refine oil, but continue to use gasoline and just import it from someplace else, that somehow helps the global climate. It's absurdity. I mean, like, we are supposed to believe
Yeah,
people
you
who
can't
tell
make it up.
us you can't. It's insane. Our colleague, Ed Ring, as well as just about anybody, John, but my colleague Ed Ring, he's one of the founders of CPC. He's our energy and water guy. And Ed has calculated that we burn more bunker fuel than any other state in the union in order to get our gasoline. Zero question. And you would think that
It's
Hawaii
completely
might be, but we
bonkers.
burn far more. Pardon?
It's bonkers, especially because during this period of time, the United States is a net exporter of oil, and that I mean, we produce more oil in the United States than we need, and so during this time, we're exporting oil, but they can't export it here because they
Right.
don't make special blend,
That's
right?
right.
So we're like cuckoo
Yes.
for Cocoa Puffs here.
So this is a story, this is not something that happened, only once a long time ago. As I say, this story came out in the LA Times this week showing this lone, sad cargo ship carrying fuel from Iraq. But here's this reporter at the LA Times. Did they assign an energy expert, somebody who really knows the oil industry? No, they assigned a woman named Blanca Begert at the LA Times, and she's their environmental climate writer. So who did she go to find out why are energy prices so high? Number one, you must blame Trump, she says. You have to blame Trump. Number two, why can't California produce its own oil? Here's her explanation, John. You're going to love this. California's own supply of crude oil has been declining since the 1980s. Why? She says, due to aging oil fields and a geology that makes drilling particularly costly.
What?
This is absurdly untrue. It is absolutely
Well, it
unfalse.
is absurdly
I'm sorry.
costly, but only because the government makes it absurdly costly.
Yeah, that's right. So the idea of aging fields, well, she might mean that the technology in the fields is aging because you're not allowed to drill the oil out anymore. So you have to really try to cap these things. And once you cap them, yes, they are aging. But is the geology here so unique that we can't drill? No, it is not. We have also advanced in our technology there. So there's one problem.
underneath underneath the state of California is one of the deepest, most available oil reserves on the planet,
Yeah.
but you gotta be willing to get it.
A couple of points that I would make here real quickly, if I may, is that Gavin Newsom and Jerry Brown before him both saw the rising price of gasoline as a benefit, not a curse, until it became a problem for Gavin Newsom politically. How is he going to run for president if, in fact, everywhere he goes, somebody says, why is the price of gasoline so high in your state? Well, he used to try to argue until about a year and a half ago. He argued that it was because oil companies were weirdly obsessed with gouging Californians, but not gouging all other Americans. Well, the
Right.
real answer is we spend somewhere around $1.50 to $1.80 more on taxes, number one. Then we have that boutique fuel, which is more expensive to begin with, number two. And number three, we produce none of our own local oil and energy. We have been shutting down refineries at an alarming rate. Your listeners already know that. So Gavin Newsom finally turns around. He goes from gouging to asking for a study about why oil companies are shutting down the refineries, if you can believe it. He's beat them over the head and then wonders why they object and why they might leave.
Yeah,
So
it's
my
so
final point would be back to the question of, how much do environmentalists love high-priced gasoline? Here's a woman cited in the same LA Times story, Kate Gordon, who runs the economic policy nonprofit California Forward and was a climate advisor to the Biden and Newsom administrations, said the one way for California to reduce its exposure to global oil price volatility is through strategies like investing in electric vehicles and infrastructure. So this is not a problem, she says. Really, this is an advantage. People are going to be encouraged to get out of their cars because of the rising price of gasoline, and that will accrue to the benefit of the global climate.
oh, you're not allowed to keep filibustering. I'm gonna insert
Please.
myself. I wanna make a point on this. So this was like, again, last night when I was watching the governor's debate over and over and over again, we saw most of the Democrats just go on and on about if you're mad about high oil prices, blame President Trump because of
That's right.
Iran. But none of them, I mean, I think at least Hilton said it, none of them were willing to acknowledge that, I don't know, for years before there was an Iran
Mhm.
crisis, that that oil costs more here, and in fact, right now, we're the only the average around the country is about $4 a gallon, and everyone around the country is hyperventilating, whereas we here in California wish we don't even remember the last time we saw a
Oh,
$4 gas.
John, I do. I look this up every week for the podcast. I try to find out when was the last time Californians paid the price that everybody else in America is complaining about today. The answer is sometime between 2011 and 2014. That was the last time we paid the prices that everybody else in America is outraged to pay. We
Yeah.
haven't paid that in a decade, John, or
All
more.
right. So this is what we're gonna do here at 56 minutes and going. So this is the point where I tell everybody we're not done because we've got one more thing that we're gonna cover, which is the best part. But I'm acknowledging to everybody that if you need to tinkle or you have an important meeting, we're not gonna hold it against you. And it's a reminder that this is gonna get emailed out tomorrow and you'll be able to watch it at your convenience. But one of the things I love the most about Will, and there's so much to love about Will. I'm so jealous of your wife. There's so much to love about Will. But Will is in fact a historian, not only by almost practice, but it's a passion of his. And so one of the things I love about listening to his podcast with David, Radio Free California, is that he always brings in a historical perspective. And I'm like, Will, I want that for this show. And so we're gonna get it right now. And it's kind of an interesting kind of a cultural perspective that Will jump in here. And I think
Sure.
don't leave if you haven't left, hold it in. Listen to Will. This is great.
I'll make it really fast. On the 13th of this month, that is just in a couple of days, you and I are recording this on the 6th of May. On the 13th of May in
Actually, I'm recording it on the
1941.
7th, but don't tell anyone.
Oh my gosh. Sorry. Yeah, I got screwed up here. Sorry. You're right. So in 6 days, we will celebrate the birth of one Richie Valens. He is the for
Alabama.
You know what? I tried to get David Bonson to sing that on the show, and he would not. Continue, please. Yeah, so he recorded at age 6. He's born in L.A. in the San Fernando Valley, and he records this very famous song, La Bamba. And he was 16 years old when he wrote this song, John. And he is immediately just a heartthrob, comes straight out of L.A. And he sings this entire song in Spanish. It's a mix of a Mexican folk genre called son jarocho and but also kind of rockabilly, rock and roll. And it is so wildly popular. It hits the top singles for 1958 and 59. It has since been recorded by innumerable people. One of his other songs, Come On, Let's Go, one of my favorites, has been recorded by the Ramones. I used to really be into punk rock. Ramones, go listen to Come On, Let's Go. But here's what's really amazing about the story. Valens did not speak Spanish. He had to write the lyrics. He had to get them from his family members. I believe it was his abuelita, which is Spanish for his grandmother,
Well,
who told him,
in the movie, yeah, this is in the movie.
yes, is it? With Lou Diamond Phillips.
Yes.
That he doesn't speak Spanish is in the movie.
No, the grandmother's in the movie. I don't remember if
Ah,
him not speaking Spanish is in the movie. I don't think that
well,
was the case. Because
he
Lou
translated
Diamond Phillips spoke English in the movie.
in the movie, yeah. So neither did Richie Valens. Didn't speak Spanish, so his grandmother tells him what the words would be to La Bamba, and he has to write them down phonetically and then memorize the phonetic. He does not know what he's singing. A little bit like hearing a German sing a Beatles song or something. So the song just goes crazy. Everybody's just in love with Richie Valens. And he goes on a tour. And what was the tour called? I have it in here somewhere. It was called the Winter Dance Party. And weirdly, the Winter Dance Party rock and roll tour is headlined by Buddy Holly. That's not the weird part. The weird part is a winter dance party that tours through the Midwest and Northeast. Like, wouldn't you take the winter dance party out to SoCal and I don't know, the Southwest? I
Miami,
would.
right, or Miami.
Yeah, exactly. But they go to the Midwest. The weather is horrible. Among the other guys there, some of our older listeners will recall the name the Big Bopper, was also on tour.
Buddy
The Big
Holly,
Bopper gets, pardon?
and Buddy Holly.
Yes, Buddy Holly is the headliner. And so the 17-year-old boy now, Richie Valens, is out there with these, these adults, and they take care of him. It's a very different time. He's safe in their hands. Buddy Holly charters a jet at one point because the bus is the heater has broken down. It is freezing cold outside and in the bus. And they'll play a long show at night and pack up all the gear, climb onto the bus, try to sleep until they get to the next town, and then do it all over again every night, a different town. And the Big Bopper is really sick. Buddy Holly decides to get a chartered airplane. And Richie Valens flips a coin with one other guy to see who's going to go on the bus and who's going to go on the plane. And Richie Valens gets on the plane. Now, this is a big deal for Valens because he was terrified of airplanes. He'd seen one crash in his San Fernando Valley neighborhood when he was a kid. And so he was just really afraid of airplanes, but he was so desperate to get to the next town, get some good sleep, and the plane goes down. It goes down in an Iowa farm field, and everybody aboard dies. It's famously documented as the day the music died. Buddy Holly's dead, the Big Bopper is dead, and Richie Valens dead at 17. So that's just a really a tragic ending to a phenomenal story about a guy who grew up in Southern California. His life, if we had more time, I would talk about. But it really reveals how integral Mexican Americans had already become in Southern California culture. His girlfriend was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl about whom he wrote another hit song, and he was not reviled for this. It was not considered race traitorism on either side. They were just two kids madly in love. And I love this about our state. I love that this is truly by temperament, not by government edict, a place that is so creative it can produce a guy like Richie Valens, who can have a girlfriend who looks Germanic and nobody's wigging out about it. That
This
wasn't the
is
regulation.
And this is a very important distinction as you and I embrace the melting pot that is America. The idea is that you bring with you your heritage, and that never leaves. You always celebrate your culture and where you came from, but then you uniquely identify together as Americans, right? And that
That's
sort of
right.
thing. And one of the things that bothers me a lot is when the people that support illegal immigration seek to tell you that if you oppose illegal immigrants, you oppose immigration.
That's
Which of
right.
course is which is absurd, right? I mean, I can look on my family tree. I look at these battles in Ukraine. My grandmother and grandfather well, my grandfather is from Zhytomyr, which is right on the northern part of the Ukraine, right? We all, came through Ellis Island. Lord knows how long Fleischmann was before they shortened it to Fleischmann. Actually, I don't think they
Yeah.
did that German in its origin.
Yes.
But
Yes. I've seen that name all over Germany.
the
Family
meat
over there.
man, which either means
Yes, you
my
are.
great grandfather was a butcher or a pimp. We're not sure which it was, but and on that note, well, we've used up our time for today, but this was delightful. I'm really glad you were able to join me. You never know what's going to happen when you take the two of us and you put us in a live environment. Although, as you pointed out, and everybody should be tuning into Radio Free California. They do that in one take, so it's not broadcast live, but it may as well be because I'm not familiar with them ever going. We messed that up. Stop and do it again.
Never.
So you should definitely check that out. Thank you, Will, for joining us. Thank you for everything that you and everyone does over at the California Policy Center. I am a member. I am a supporter. I am an advocate. I am a fan, and everyone else should be too. Click the link below.
Offer you
Will, you
20
get the
seconds
last
of
word.
praise. Thank you. You need to talk to other people about the fact that you were kind to me when I was a communist, literally a Marxist. You were kind to me, John. And it was in part because of people like you who are real conservatives and might have just been insulted by my existence that you spoke to me. And I would encourage all of your friends who listen to this show and read your fantastic analysis. Be kind to our neighbors, even when they are absolutely knuckleheaded, Karen Bass like, or Javier Becerra kinds of people. Be kind to them. They're our neighbors. We can convert them.
I will only say this as we sign off. Somebody out there or 2 or 3 people who actually have as their neighbor Katie Porter, you have an exemption. But to everyone else, be kind to your neighbor. Thank you, Will, and we'll be back next week with another Substack Live. Will it be a monologue or will it be another guest? I don't know how we follow this amazing guest. Thanks, Will. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, pal.